Hello, I'm Ros Atkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say. We're at the end of another extraordinary week in North Africa and in the Middle East. And over the course of the programme, we'll hear from some of you from Libya, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, and of course Bahrain as well. Saif's got in touch from there on Facebook to say, we non-protesters are saying enough is enough. You've made your point. You're now poisoning the international media against our government. And we're going to be discussing how all the respective protesters and governments should respond to the past few days. And wherever you're watching BBC World News and however you want to get involved, you're very welcome here on World Have Your Say. Just looking through some of your messages, Hin49 has tweeted us to say, God bless Bahrain, our king and our leadership. May all friction dissolve through our unity as Bahrainis. Khalid's also there, emailing worldhaveyourSay@bbc.com to say, is it time for the tyrant regime in Bahrain to go? Yes, it is. It should follow the other regimes in Iraq, Tunisia and Egypt. But we'll hear more about what's happening in Bahrain in a moment. But first of all, let's look at the latest news here on the BBC, beginning in Libya, where there have been large demonstrations, especially in the second city of Benghazi. Thousands of protesters are reported to be converging on the courthouse, and eyewitnesses told the BBC there's been a prison break. Meanwhile, Libyan groups in exile are claiming that protesters have seized control of the eastern city of Al-Baida. Colonel Gaddafi has vowed to crack down on the protests. Next, we go to Jordan, where 8 people have been injured in clashes between crowds supporting and opposing the government. It's a 7th day of protest, but the first to turn violent. Meanwhile, it's day 8 in Yemen, where the target of protest is President Ali Abdullah Saleh. There are varying reports of how many people have died, but the figure is at least 2. Witnesses are saying that one person was killed when a hand grenade was thrown into a crowd of demonstrators in the city of Taiz. Another was shot in the port of Aden, and police are reported to have been firing shots and using tear gas. From Yemen to Bahrain now, where tens of thousands of people have gathered for the funerals of demonstrators killed on Thursday. They died during the security forces' clear-out of a protest camp in Pearl Square in Manama. Many of you will be aware that Bahrain is home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet, while the Obama administration has expressed concern at the treatment of the protesters. And in Egypt, a week almost to the hour after Hosni Mubarak stood down, Tahrir Square is again the focus of an enormous rally. The influential Egyptian cleric Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi has been addressing jubilant crowds and calling on Arab leaders to heed what was going on across the region. And I'm just looking on the live page on bbcnews.com. Nicholas Christoph of the New York Times has tweeted, police are attacking protesters here at a hospital in Bahrain, tear gas inside and panic. And a witness in Manama has told the BBC, the witness is called Saeed, saying he's approaching Pearl Roundabout and he can hear gunshots. Well, we're going to start our conversation with guests from Libya, from Iran. But first of all, a Bahraini is joining us from Newcastle. Michel Al-Malki is with us. Michel, what's your reaction to what you're hearing from Bahrain?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your program. I think the minority are the protesters, actually, because today more than 100,000 people after a Friday prayer were outside to support the king and the government. And actually, as the Bahrain television was showing yesterday, they found some guns and knives and what it's called Hezbollah flags. And that shows they are supported from some countries in the area.
You're making the accusation that Iran is perhaps getting involved, something that hasn't been proved, but lots of people online are suggesting it. You're in, Michel, you're in Newcastle. Let's bring in Samir, who's on the phone from Manama in Bahrain. Samir, tell us what you've heard from friends and family.
Hi, thank you for having me online here. The thing that I would like to say is that all the people, all the residents, including the expatriates and Bahrainis, no matter what religious sect they belong to, they're really terrorized, and because of this little group of people who I don't know where they and how or what they belong to, but they just gathered there, and they're just the only plan that they have on their agenda is to scare people away.
Michelle, we're hearing from Samir that people are feeling terrorized. Does that not concern you?
Yeah, I think most people in Bahrain, they feel terrorized about what is happening from these people, the protesters, and what have they done actually to scare people. However, I think today and what's happening yesterday, they cut what today the people shows their loyalty to the government and to the king, and I think this is the most important. And I think for like 2 days or more, it's gonna be everything is fine, and the save will be.
So you're optimistic that this will calm down. Samir, in the capital, do you think after a few days this will calm down, things will return to normal?
Yeah, we have full faith with the leadership, and we have full faith in the security officials down here that they will bring life back to normal, and that's why they have been brutally injured, and that's the reason they've given their life. We had 2 police security officials who were dead and 82 brutally injured by these people. Even now, I can see them on the streets because I'm very close to the Pearl roundabout. I can see these people breaking glass bottles, and they're trying to shoot on the arm them at the security officers, and then they call themselves as peaceful.
Samir, are you safe to speak to us? Do you need to go?
Yeah, it's okay because I'm still in my car and I hope I'm safe.
And you say you're seeing people attacking the protesters, but are the protesters fighting back? Because lots of Bahrainis have called World Have Your Say to say the protesters are as bad as the people trying to clear them out.
The people that are trying to clear them out are not bad. It's the protesters, because they're holding stones in their hands and they've got glass bottles. They're breaking them off and they're trying to throw them at anybody around.
And it's worth saying, Samir, because as you're talking, we can see pictures on the screen here on BBC World News. This is footage from Thursday night when the authorities moved in to clear out that opposition encampment in Pearl Square. These are not live pictures. These are pictures from Thursday. But what happened on Thursday certainly led to things becoming more tense in Bahrain. You'll have seen those thousands of people turning out for the protesters, for the funeral of the protesters who were killed during that operation. Samir, thank you very much. And if any of you are watching, the phone number for World Have Your Say is scrolling along the bottom of the screen throughout the time that we're talking. I can see that CNN's Nick Robertson has tweeted, protesters are fleeing Pearl Square. They're saying that rounds are being fired. They're hearing sporadic gunfire. People are milling around, though. It's not clear what's happening next. I'll keep you up to date on everything that's happening on Twitter. Let's bring in a couple of other guests. We've heard from Michal, who's in Newcastle in the north of England. He's staying with us. We also have Ehsan Narouzi, who's an Iranian journalist based in Germany, but live with us from Brussels, and also Ashur Shamis, a Libyan online journalist based in London. And Ashur, of course, there's been plenty of developments from Libya today. What's your reaction to the various reports we're hearing out of all the main cities in Libya?
Well, the attention today on Benghazi. Protesters have moved in and have gathered in larger numbers than before. They went on to take off the to take over the prison of Kuwaifia, where political prisoners are being kept. They freed all the prisoners. They went on to overrun the main government setup, which controls the city. They have taken over the city, and there are other groups in Baida, in Jdabia, and in other places. There are a few persons also killed as well.
We've also had an email from one viewer in Tripoli who says this city is reaching boiling point, and it is worth reminding you that Human Rights Watch is saying that 24 people have been killed in 5 different locations in Libya this week. We're getting calls at the moment from Bahrain, Niger, Nigeria and Ghana. Please do keep calling. We'll get as many of you onto World Have Your Say as we can. We're discussing what the protesters in these different countries in North Africa and in the Middle East should do, and also what the government should do, because, of course, there are plenty of you watching who want stability rather than reform. Let's bring in Ehsan Narouzi, an Iranian journalist, with us live from Brussels. What do you think the protesters in Iran should do next? They were dealt with by the authorities with a firm hand a couple of days ago. What should be their tactic now?
Actually, after the February 14 protests, it was kind of shocking for the Iranian authorities, because they were always claiming that the Green movement is dead, but after like 8 months, the people came to the streets, hundreds of thousands of people again came to the streets, and the Iranian government's reaction actually was really shocking for the people also. It was kind of humiliation again. They killed 2 people and exploited their dead bodies for their own purposes. They were calling that they are either the Basiji forces or the militia forces and or secret agents that were working
but
for
it is worth pointing out, isn't it, that thousands of people supporting Mahmoud Ahmadinejad have also been out on the streets saying they don't want reform. In fact, they want opposition leaders tried and possibly sentenced to death.
Yes, actually, they were obviously calling for the Green Movement leaders to be executed. They are security forces or Basij forces and the pro-government forces. But there are also millions of people who are supporting Green Movement, and they showed on February 14 that they don't have any more fear of the dictatorship and its security forces' brutal suppression. And so now the opposition leaders are under house arrest, but they have planned other protests in 20th of February nationwide. So and now it seems that the reformers inside the country are not any more optimistic, and
okay. So you're advocating further protests. You're advocating further protests despite the conflict. I do wonder, Ashur, whether you also think it's sensible for people to go out onto the streets when it will clearly lead to bloodshed if the events of the past couple of days are anything to go by.
Well, at the moment, the whole thing is almost run out of hand, and there was no dialogue established with the authorities, neither in Tripoli nor in Benghazi. The authorities don't want to listen to these demands. They think that these people are, bent on destroying things, which is not the case. So if there is no dialogue, then the protesters will have to use other means to draw attention to themselves, especially of the foreign media and the Twitters and the Facebook people and so on. That's the situation.
Well, it's worth also pointing out, Colonel Gaddafi says that Libya has the mechanisms for people to ask for reform. The people in Bahrain are also making that point. Lots of you in Bahrain are calling us here on BBC World News. We'll get as many of you as we can onto the air during both editions of World Have Your Say. I can see that a former Shiite lawmaker in Bahrain is saying that troops have shot at protesters near Pearl Square. Reuters is also reporting that gunshots have been heard in and around Pearl Square. We'll bring you the latest on that as we discuss this on World Have Your Say. Now, for the moment, Ashur, Ehsan and Michal, thank you very much indeed for your comments. And all of you watching, do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. The BBC's World Have Your Say is a place where people come together to talk about the issues, events and experiences that matter most to them. It's live on BBC Radio, online, and now every Friday it's here on BBC World News. And while we may provide the platform, the issues that we discuss are the ones that you're already talking about. This isn't about us interviewing you, it's about you talking to people around the world.
A lot of the power of the programme comes from, say, a taxi driver in Moscow being able to talk to a farmer in Uganda about the same subject. We've taken the programme around the world to many different places. South Africa during the World Cup, we were in Beijing during the Olympics, and we were in Haiti immediately after the earthquake.
Foreign aides need to know that there has always been corruption in this country. Make sure everything is distributed the right way.
I'm hoping that World Have Your Say on the TV will recreate the atmosphere of the radio and the online site, a gathering together of people around the world to talk in a civilised atmosphere and share ideas and experiences.
These guys are our brothers and sisters, and they have nowhere to go. They have made mistakes along the line in the past. We just have to forgive them.
We want to make World Have Your Say as accessible as we possibly can, so we're not short of contact details. You can phone us up now. The number's country code 44 2070 83 72 72. Of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter as well. Our email is worldhaveyoursay@bbc.com, or you can text us from anywhere on country code 44 7786 20 60 80. And we know that some of those contact details aren't the snappiest, but don't worry, they're all at worldhaveyoursay.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Well, there's an enormous amount going on around North Africa and the Middle East. You'll hear all the latest here on BBC World News. Developments in Libya, in Jordan, also in Yemen and in Bahrain. Bahrain in particular, there are a number of reports coming in through Twitter, Facebook and on the news agencies that gunfire has been heard in and around Pearl Square. We'll bring you all the latest on that as we get it. Still with us, we have Ashur Shamis, a Libyan journalist based in London. He's with us live, as is Mashal Al-Malki, a Bahraini who lives in the north of England. We're going to say thanks to Ehsan, our Iranian journalist who's been with us from Brussels, but Ehsan will be coming back to you a little later in the programme. And joining us from Cairo is Mayan Fawaz, a protester who also works in the PR industry. Mayan, I'll come to you in just a moment, because let me bring you let me bring in an anonymous caller from Bahrain. We know that you're a teacher. You don't want to say anything more about yourself, which we respect. Do tell us what you make of these reports that the authorities are turning to gunfire to quell the protests.
Well, we have to see why they're turning to gunfire. Is it because the protesters are not following the rule and the law? I mean, there are some laws in effect that the government would like people to respect and obey at this point of time before, and the protesters are just going about defying those rules. So how do you, I mean, what is it that's making the government turn to the ways that they've turned to?
And explain to all of our viewers why you object to what the protesters are doing, because these protesters say we've been ruled by the same monarchy for 200 years. The Prime Minister has been in power for 40 years. This is supposed to be a democracy, but it's anything but the sort. What do you say to people who argue that?
Well, I just ask them, Bahrain, or I just tell them basically, Bahrain is not Egypt, Bahrain is not Yemen, Bahrain is not Libya. We are the GCC. GCC works on a different rules and regulations. We have free education. We have free medical. We have, scholarships for tons and hundreds of students who would like to pursue university degrees. We have jobs which are created. We have, the government has in effect a rule called Bahrainization, which says that every company that exists in Bahrain has to have a certain percentage of local Bahrainis on their payroll.
Okay, so you make the case that life in a number of different ways is serving Bahrainis very well. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. By the way, the pictures you can see on the screen are from earlier funerals of some of those protesters killed when Pearl Square was cleared out in the middle of the night on Thursday. I wonder if Mashal, a Bahraini in the north of England, and Ashur in the south of England, I'd be interested to hear the two of you talk about the points that anonymous caller was making. Maybe Ashur, you could start us off, but Mashal, do feel free to respond.
Yeah, thanks for her points. Actually, it's very important to mention. And also I want to add one point. We have a free housing that every Bahraini citizen have the right, and the government should give him or must give him a free housing once he gets married. Also, the percentage of unemployment from 16% in King Hamad period since 10 years.
But Mashal, I mean, we heard from the anonymous caller the details of how well she believed Bahrainis were being looked after by their government. But what I'm interested to hear you two discuss is whether that's got anything to do with someone's right to protest. Maybe Ashur, you could pick up on this first.
Bahrain is a free...
Mashal, let's give Ashur a chance to come in.
Well, you see, in Libya, you've got a different situation. You've got the revolt is not really against or because of economic deprivation, but it's mostly because of the fact that the dignity of the people has been destroyed. They have no more dignity. They have no more say in the affairs of their lives, in the affairs of the country. There is monopoly of politics and monopoly of the economy, monopoly of every sensitive and important issue in the land.
But if if that monopoly is serving the people well, and that's what we're hearing from not just these two Bahrainis, but a number of others who've called World Have Your Say, is that enough to justify restrictions on how you can protest?
No, it's not. It's not serving the people well. There is no free press. There is no free expression, freedom of expression. There is no way you can have your say and have it really dealt with by people who are responsible. So there is no way that the people themselves can assert their own personality.
Okay, so two different views there. Your view as a Libyan, another from Michal as a Bahraini, and the argument is whether if certain things are provided, healthcare, education and so on, housing as well, is that enough? And in turn, you should accept that there will be some restrictions on how you can protest. Wherever you're watching BBC World News, do get in touch through facebook.com/World Have Your Say. I can see calls coming in from Morocco, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. We'll try and bring a couple more of you in as we can. I can also see that the US Embassy in Sana'a in Yemen says it's observed a disturbing rise in the number and violence of attacks against Yemeni citizens gathering peacefully to express their views on the current political situation. So the US expressing concern, as it did a couple of days ago, about the situation in Bahrain. Well, let's speak to Mayan, a protester in Cairo who's been listening to all of this. Well, first of all, Mayan, you're a week on now. How have things changed?
They have changed in the sense that we have right now the military, the armed forces are in control and they're doing their best to speed up the reform in the country, and there are protests that are still ongoing throughout different areas, whether in sectors, in the banking sector, for instance. Like, people now have the sense that they can say what they want, that they can ask for their rights, whether it's for wages, healthcare. There's a different sense of unity between Egyptians in general now, and a sense of pride all over the streets of Egypt.
And Mayan, as you're talking to us, in the other window on the screen, we can see that's live footage coming in from Tahrir Square, another vast protest. I just wonder, Mayan, we've got guests from Libya, from Bahrain, there are people watching us all around the world. What's your message to those countries experiencing protests at the moment?
Well, I guess that be safe. I mean, I was in the protests when they were violent, and then they turned out, and continuing over the 18 days. And my message to them is, have your voice, let it be heard. Make your statement. It really this is what it comes down to, is to have your voices, your demands. Everybody should have a right to say what they want, even if the government doesn't want you to. People should have that right.
And Michal, you're listening to Mayan. Why are you not persuaded by the case that she makes? She describes all these changes she's already seeing in Egypt and the euphoria people are experiencing. Don't you want any of that for your country?
But exactly, we have a freedom to say whatever we want. We have the right to do to protest for whatever we want. But the people that protest in Bahrain was thinking that by violence they can do whatever they want. Also, we can reach the king whenever we want by different ways, such as the parliament that elected from the people. Also, the meetings that it's set up every week between the prime minister and the people. I think this is and the free media as well. We have a free media, you can write whatever you want in the newspaper.
Why is it, Michal, when you say you've got a free media, so many people call World Have Your Say and don't want to tell us their names or what they do for a living?
However, I think it's their case, but however, I think in my mind and in a lot of Bahraini citizens, they think that we have the right to say whatever we want.
I know that. Well, we know because they're calling us. Lots of people are watching us in Bahrain at the moment. Do you think Michal is accurately describing the freedom of speech you have? If you're in Bahrain, the numbers scrolling along the bottom. In fact, wherever you're watching, you're very welcome to join the conversation. I'm still following Nicholas Christoph, who's tweeting for the New York Times. He's in Bahrain. He says, "I'm at the hospital in Bahrain. Lots of casualties. ER filling up. One girl of about 13 writhing on a sweatshirt. One man with a terrible head wound," he says. I'll repeat, reports that there has been firing in and around Pearl Square in Bahrain. Well, let's shift from Bahrain to Yemen for the moment. There have been disturbances in Aden, Taiz, and also in the capital, Sana'a. Let's speak to Atiaf, who's a protester in Sana'a. Tell us what you've seen today, Atiaf.
Hi. Protests today were horrible. People were protesting very peacefully today in Sana'a. And suddenly, the security personnel blocked the entire area and let in the thugs to come beat up the protesters. There were two young girls that I saw, around 7-year-old girls, that were selling books, and they got caught there. And I took them with me, and we told the security, we hid in a house, and we told the security personnel that I have children here, and instead of protecting us, they called the thugs to come and...
Atiaf, I'm going to have to jump in because we're up to the end of this edition of World Have Your Say. Stay in and do join us on the next edition. Well, we know from reports on Twitter, Facebook, and also news coming in on the news agencies that there are reports of gunfire in and around Pearl Square in Bahrain. Let's immediately bring in Martin, who's very close to Pearl Square. Martin, what can you see?
Hi, I'm in one of the buildings nearby Pearl Square, and there's been a definite build-up of activity. There's a lot more riots there than there were earlier, and over the last hour, sporadically, I've heard some... that might be gunfire or tear gas or another form of bang, but it's definitely been just south of the square. It's out of view at the moment, but the police have gathered in force.
And how many police and how many protesters can you see, Martin?
From where I am, the square is completely cordoned off by police and military. I can see upwards of 100 police vehicles gathering on the southern side of the square, and they've moved further south down the main slip road. I can't see any protesters at this time because the area is heavily cordoned off.
Martin, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us live from Bahrain. I can see that Aika has texted us from Beijing to say the people who fight for freedom and revolution don't have any plan. And Anna's tuned in on Australia. The winds of change are unstoppable. Well, let me turn to a number of our guests. We have Michal in the north of England. Shaw is a Libyan journalist in London, and also Ehsan Nourouzi is an Iranian journalist in Brussels. Let me ask you, Ehsan, that point that's come in from Beijing, that those of you who oppose the status quo have no plan for what to do if you do get rid of the government.
Yes, exactly. At least in the case of Iran, people knows what they want. People exactly know what they want. They wanted to change they wanted to reform in the political structure through democratic process. But unfortunately, the government, the regime, stole the election in June 2009, and now the people have come to this conclusion that it's not possible to make any changes, any reforms through the democratic process, and now they want to continuously protest to bring down the regime. They want to replace it with a peaceful government that is cooperating closely with the international community.
Okay, so you say replace the whole system, replace the government. That's the best way to bring reform. Michal, you're a Bahraini. Why do you believe, in your case, the best way to reform is within the system?
Because I think Bahrain country has seen very improvement since 10 years. I think the freedom and the loyalty that shows from people since 2002 by the percentage of 98.4 to choose the king. I think it's the way that the people should should be all together. And also this kind of the protester actually, they have behind what they was telling as a peaceful peaceful demonstration, they have to scare the people. They want to scare the people. They want to take over the country and to monopolize everything. So I think they are just the minority.
Okay, so you make a case for reform within. It's reminding me of the conversations we had from Egypt over the past few weeks about whether to reform from within the system or whether to actually get rid of the leader. More reports here from Bahrain. The Associated Press is saying that at least 20 people have been injured in clashes between protesters and security forces. We'll get more on that in a moment, but let's turn our attentions to Yemen, where there's been an 8th day of protests. WHYS has been involved in those protests. In our earlier edition, you told us a little of what you've seen today, but tell us some more, WHYS.
Well, as I said, peaceful protests continued. The security forces today watched as the thugs threw rocks. I heard gunshots. People were beaten. We had to take refuge in someone's house, and there were 2 kids who were caught in the middle and were with me. And when we informed the security, they, instead of helping us, they called the thugs to come and try to beat us up. But we had the doors blocked. In Taiz, it was much worse with the grenade being thrown. It's clearly an escalation of violence by security personnel. And the question I have for the government is this the reform that you promised?
And we've got confirmed reports that at least 2 people have died today. There have been clashes not just where you are in Sana'a, but also in Taiz and in Aden. But as this violence continues, do you still think it's justified for protesters to turn out onto the streets, or should you stop until things have calmed down?
I think protesters should not stop. They have the right to be there. The violence by security personnel and by these thugs, that's what should stop. And they're trying to do this to scare peaceful protesters from going to the streets and demanding their rights. If anyone should stop, it's the violence.
Sorry for jumping across you there. Atiaf, thank you for speaking to us from Sana'a. Jidda's watching in Nigeria and says Gaddafi's been a good leader for all of these years. He provides many things for his people. That's echoing some of the comments we're seeing from Bahrainis who say, don't worry about protests. Look at the education, the healthcare, and also the houses that the royal family in Bahrain provide. OK, let's bring in a couple of other guests now. We'll say goodbye to Ehsan, the Iranian journalist who is with us in Brussels. We'll speak to him a little bit later and bring in Mayan Fawaz, who works in PR in Cairo and also was involved in those huge protests against Hosni Mubarak. Well, there's another one taking place in Tahrir Square today, reminding the army's ruling council that the protesters still want reform. Mayan, you and lots of other protesters made a big issue of remaining peaceful. Do you think that message should be listened to by the protesters elsewhere in North Africa and the Middle East?
I hope so, of course, because violence will create more resistance, and then it will turn into a situation nobody wants to see. Peaceful protests it's the best method in all those regions, and I really hope it continues to be that way.
You say, of course, you want peace, and I suppose almost everyone watching this programme would say that. But what about when the security forces take a heavy hand, such as they have in Bahrain? How do you think protesters should react in those cases?
That's a bit tricky because in each country, as I have seen or watched the news and the tweets and everything, everyone has been reacting. Each government or each police force has been reacting differently, using different methods of violence or force. To the protesters, I advise them to stay safe but not to be scared and not to let those violent acts scare them from having their voice being heard.
Thank you very much for those comments. Thanks also to Ashur Shamis for the moment, an online journalist, Libyan online journalist based in London. I can see that Sidi in Mauritania has texted to say the next Arab League summit will see a lot of new faces. Well, we'll have to see how many new faces. And Satif has emailed from Algeria. By the way, all our contact details are scrolling along the bottom of the screen the whole time. Satif says the Algerian regime should listen to people. We cannot stand dictatorial regimes any longer. Of course, we saw those small protests in Algiers a week ago, but nothing very much since. Let's bring in Mahmoud Yasser Al-Yusuf, who's a blogger based in Manama in Bahrain. Mahmoud, what's your reaction to the reports of gunfire in and around Pearl Square, and how do you think the protesters should respond?
Well, it's very, very shocking and disturbing, to say the very least. How they could respond is duck. What else can they do? They have absolutely no arms with them. They have they're only their bodies. If you want them to put them in front of the line to actually offer the human shield that they require, then so be it. But this situation is very dire, and it requires calm heads and steady hands now to get this country out of the quagmire that it found itself in. This is going on for years. It's not just happening overnight. This is a systemic problem within the country that requires now a serious attempt at dialogue in order to find the middle ground and create the constitution that rises to the aspirations.
Mahmoud, you're talking about the importance of staying calm. Mishal's a Bahraini who lives in the UK. Mishal, do you think the government's response is calm? Was that calmness on Thursday night?
I think, yeah, I think because they, as it shows in Bahrain TV, they informed them many times because they was trying to affect our economy by shutting down a lot of shops that in front of the Pearl Square, and also they went to one of the malls and destroyed some of the shops inside it, and where they were also was doing a security point that scared every person. They were like checking cars. So I think because they informed them and they came at 3 o'clock where they're...
OK, so that's interesting. And other people phoning up are saying these protesters were given enough warning. They knew the routine. If they hadn't cleared out, they should expect to be dealt with force. Mishal, thank you for those comments. Mayan in Egypt, thanks to you as well. And Mahmoud, the blogger from Bahrain on Skype, we appreciate you being with us. And all of you watching on BBC World News, do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. Hi to all of you watching BBC World News. Welcome to World Have Your Say. Well, even by the standards of the past few weeks, it has been an extraordinary day. It continues to be an extraordinary day. We've had protests in Egypt, in Libya, in Yemen, Jordan, and also in Bahrain. Just looking at the situation in Yemen, you may have heard me mention earlier, a person was killed by a hand grenade in the city of Taiz. Well, a senior Interior Ministry official now says police have arrested the driver of a car from which a grenade was thrown at one of the anti-government protests in Taiz. We'll bring you any more on that as we get it. Now, this isn't just a conversation which is taking place around the world in English, of course. It's also being discussed in Arabic. Let's cross to our colleagues at BBC Arabic right away, where the Talking Point programme is live on air. Hazem Abu Wafda is one of the team there. Hazem, so many different things to talk about. What are your viewers focusing on?
Actually, we are in today's program, we are focusing on the voices we hear from Libya, Iraq, and Bahrain, and Yemen as well. As you may know, some of the phone lines are made very difficult to get through in Libya and in Bahrain as well. It's hard to get to people in Iraq as well to speak because there is no internet as much as in some other Arab countries like in Egypt or Tunisia. So we are trying to hear from people and focusing on people in those countries, and we are hearing a lot of different opinions that I can give you some examples of.
Please do.
Yeah, actually there is a Hamid from Sana'a saying that the Yemen is a free country and Yemeni people will not fall for the blackmailing and pressure, as he called it, from the opposition's parties, who are actually part of them, as he says, currently in the government. And Yemen is refusing the chaos. Abdul Qadir is answering from Yemen as well. He's saying using the guns and unprofessional power against peaceful demonstrations in Yemen is unaccepted, and this could only escalate the demonstrations and the confrontations between the police and the Yemeni people, and it's getting really worse. Ibn al-Bahrain is saying, from Al-Manama and Bahrain, he's saying there is a genocide now in Bahrain, and the people are going to keep their peaceful demonstration till they achieve their goals of, as the king, full them with his reforms, and 1 year after they voted for the national conduct, he changed the constitutions, and he actually fooled the people. That's what Ibn al-Bahrain is saying. Another voice from Bahrain, we hear from Fadil, who is saying the world should know that the people in the streets are not the real voice or representative of Bahrainis. We need more reforms, that's true, and we need a change to a better life, that's true as well. But we will never let anyone to drag the country to the civil war and sectarian violence.
Hazem, thank you very, very much indeed for giving us the perspective from BBC Arabic. If you do want to discuss everything that's happening in the Middle East and in North Africa in Arabic, do go to bbcarabic.com. In a moment, we're going to speak to an anonymous caller in Tripoli in Libya. Let me tell you a couple of other developments. Crown Prince Sheikh Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa in Bahrain promises dialogue once calm returns. That's being reported, and witnesses are also reporting renewed clashes in different parts of Libya's eastern city of Benghazi. One other thing to mention before we go to Libya, the World Have Your Say team, which is based here in London, is receiving an awful lot of calls from Bahrain, many of which, and this may be a coincidence, but it's worth mentioning, many of which use exactly the same form of words. They say things like, there's no problem with the government, the protesters are not peaceful, and finally, a phrase we're hearing a great deal, the international media is biased against the Bahrain government. Thanks to all of you for calling up. OK, let's bring in an anonymous caller from Tripoli. I read an email out earlier which said the city is approaching boiling point. Is that how you would describe it? Hello,
no,
sir.
I think... hello?
Yeah, please do carry on, sir. Apologies.
Yeah, I don't think so that Tripoli itself is on boiling point. I can see on your screen a gentleman who is professing to talk about Libya. But I know eastern part of the country has always been an anti-establishment place. But Tripoli and the rest of the country has been and is traditionally, if you see now, I can see a lot of positive in this.
Okay, well let's.
I think,
one moment before you continue. Let's immediately give Ashur Shamis a chance to respond to that. Ashur, you're an online journalist based in London. Is it fair to say that the East may oppose Colonel Gaddafi, but the rest of the country may well be satisfied with him?
I don't think so. This time, I think the dissatisfaction and the disenchantment is countrywide, and in places south of Tripoli, Zintan and Riayna and other places have also been the place of
and I'm going to jump in, Ashur, because we're right out of time. We'll carry on this discussion on BBC Radio in a couple of hours' time.